Hello, my name's Tom and I'm back talking about F1 Fantasy ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix. We already had FP1 and FP2, so there's plenty to talk about already. We're going to have a look at the times from those practice sessions in just a moment. But if you haven't already taken the time to subscribe to me, then now would be a good time as we're heading into the final stretch of the season. We've got just a few more deadlines ahead of us to cement those teams. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and I'll carry you through the final three races and then into 2024 for next season. So yeah, this is my team on screen that I've had left over from Singapore. And those of you who watched my team selection video earlier in the week know that I had a pretty good outcome, picking the Ferraris, going against the grain, and getting a bit of a differential pick, climbing the rankings into the top 1,000 for the first time. Cha-ching! Let's stay in there if we can for the next few races. It's going to be difficult because I've only got my triple DRS boost plus a wildcard left, and there'll be a few others with other chips remaining. But I'm confident. I'm confident that we can, get that amazing finish as long as we are consistent and go for the optimal team each week. And that's exactly what I'm going to be discussing right now. What is the optimal team for Japan? So we've seen FP1, FP2. Let's have a quick look, very brief look at the practice session times in case you haven't already seen. Who's back on top after a disastrous weekend? Relatively disastrous weekend from Red Bull last weekend, but none other but Max Verstappen absolutely at total comfort, at ease in that car from the get-go, already putting in purple sectors like straight off the get-go from in FP1, and he's topped the leaderboards by quite a significant margin in both practice sessions. Red Bull, Max Verstappen on a track that should suit them anyway. They've come in, everything's positive coming from their camp, so I think with pretty much 100% certainty at this point, the Red Bull constructor will be coming back in for me this week. So other sort of food for thought. The Ferraris in FP1, FP2 also in second place. So they're a bit of a differential with those of us like myself who are stuck with Carlos Sainz from Singapore. Lando Norris kind of as expected right up there as well in that upgraded McLaren. Past that, not really too much in the way of surprises. The usual suspects in Mercedes, Aston Martin, etc. A little surprise, I guess, would be Yuki Tsunoda up in P5 and FP1, but there's not too much we can read into that, I would say. In general, I think the AlphaTauris might struggle a little bit around here. But that might come into play when we talk about the budget option further down the video. But this is, like I say, my team at the moment. And I've already said that the Ferraris are almost certainly out, although I do think the Ferraris look good in both qualifying and race pace. They looked okay in the practice session so far. Like, they're pretty close. And I'd say it's quite close between Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez for a lot of people this week as well. Fernando Alonso, although I anticipate him to do a lot better this week than he did last week out in Singapore, scoring a -1 for the weekend last week. I think he'll do better, but if I'm bringing him back in the Red Bull constructor, I have to make some cuts somewhere. So Fernando Alonso is going to be the full guy for me because I want to make sure I am fully tripled up on the McLarens, upgraded McLarens yet again. Keep bringing these big upgrades, gaining several tenths of a second each time. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see the likes of Lando Norris on the podium come Sunday. So yeah, for me, triple McLaren, they're still at a really good price, similar sort of price, although they're kind of pulling away a little bit from the Aston Martin prices now. But a lot of us would have already jumped on McLaren. So if you haven't already jumped on McLaren, I would advise you to jump on McLaren and yeah, kind of leave those Aston Martin assets behind. Although I do think Aston Martin will, like I say, have a better weekend this weekend, but not as good as the McLaren boys I expect. So triple McLaren locked in for me. Max Verstappen definitely locked in. He's not going anywhere this week, and like I say, tripled up on him effectively with the double DRS plus the Red Bull Racing. So we're going all in on Max Verstappen this weekend. The only couple of slots for me, like I say, is this. This is my current team, like 100%. I'm going with these 5 people. Now the next decision comes: do I want Perez? Do I want Sainz? Early on in the week, I was sort of considering maybe Russell as an option, but Mercedes look like they're struggling slightly in the practice session, so I'm not going to be picking George Russell. For me, it's definitely between Carlos Sainz and Perez, and I'm kind of leaning a bit more towards Perez at the moment. In terms of race pace, they've looked pretty much on par. This is going to be a high degradation track, as there's been some complaints from the drivers about the cars just not gripping. There's some new tarmac laid down on certain parts of the track, and it's just not gripping, which is going to cause more degradation. And we know historically through this season, the Ferraris haven't been great on degradation, and Perez is one of those drivers that you can trust fairly reliably to keep on top of the degradation. He's got a good track running, track history, track record, whatever the saying is. We know that Perez can do well in terms of tyre management. So, and it's not just about that. I just think in general the Red Bulls just are going to want to massively bounce back from last week. So I think Perez kind of gets in there as well. So I'm kind of leaning towards a triple up on both these boys, which It kind of leaves me with just the budget option, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. However, I will say that I am kind of still open to the idea of Carlos Sainz. I think he's the in-form man at the moment. He's obviously just won a race. Finally, a non-Red Bull driver has won a race. So thank you, Carlos Sainz, for that. A really intelligent, well-driven race around Singapore last week. And also, I've got to bear in mind, for me, a big decision for me is the fact I've only got 2 free transfers. And now, because I jumped off Red Bull last week onto Ferrari, and I'm definitely going back to Red Bull this weekend, that's already a transfer booked in. And then the other transfer would be Alonso to make way for the Red Bull constructor. That drops me down to one of the budget options, which I'm going to discuss. I keep saying I'm going to discuss it. I will discuss it. But yeah, because I've only got 2 free transfers, it means if I want to also switch out Sainz up to Perez, then I have to either take a -4 or use the wildcard. And it seems very dramatic and extreme, but I am actually strongly just thinking just using the wildcard, because I've looked ahead at the final few races of the season and I just don't see any opportunity where I'm actually going to need that wildcard. I've already said in previous videos that I actually might just go through the whole season and not use the wildcard and not care anything of it. At no point earlier on in the season have I been locked up in terms of transfers. I've always pretty much had three free transfers to go. So anyone who's in the current situation that I find myself in, having gone with the Ferraris last week, if you're in the same situation, you've only got 2 free transfers and you want to get back to a team similar to one I've got on screen, then I am going to advocate using the wildcard, because I just don't see it. I looked ahead at the tracks and I just don't see jumping off McLaren. I don't see jumping off Red Bull. I see here and there picking the likes of Carlos Sainz or Fernando Alonso over the likes of maybe Piastri, Norris or Perez or whatever. But I think the main core of my team is pretty much set now for the rest of the season. I would hope that that's the case. And obviously, if I burn the wildcard to save me 4 points now, it might hurt me later on if suddenly Red Bulls fall off the face of the earth and Ferraris and Mercedes are where the fun's at. But I just don't see it happening. So I'm actually very, very much leaning towards a 3rd chip in as many races, which is just crazy. Having used the limitless chip a couple of weeks ago in Monza and then the autopilot chip last week in Singapore, this week I'm heavily considering, just to save myself that 4 valuable points, I'm using the wildcard. So I'll be interested to know anyone in a similar situation to me who is going to use the wildcard, who's going to keep it in their pocket and just burn a -4 if you need it. But there'll be lots of people that don't need to burn any -4s. They can just comfortably get to a team like this if they want it, particularly if you didn't go with the Ferraris last week. So anyway, I'm pretty set on this. Perez versus Sainz is close, but I'm, like I say, leaning towards Perez. And as for the budget driver, I'm currently leaning towards Guan Yu Zhou. There's a lot of talk through, if we look at all the budget drivers down here. Hulkenberg, no, I've already stated there's going to be lots of tyre degradation. The Hazes have already, explicitly said that they don't think there's going to be great round Suzuka. It's going to be a tough track for them. Hulkenberg is a big no for me this week. Logan Sargent also there's just so many mistakes from him, including last week in Singapore, just randomly going off into the wall. If you can afford someone better than Sargent and Hulkenberg, then I would heavily advocate doing so. The next best options here are clearly going to be Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda. Tsunoda's had a bit of a rough ride the last couple of weekends and scored some negative points, bringing his total for the season only 8 above his teammate Liam Lawson, who's only been with us for 3 races. So it looks like Liam Lawson's definitely the form pick and someone that I think can definitely do well this weekend on a track that he himself is actually familiar with. He's gone to Singapore on a track he's never driven before, really difficult, notoriously difficult track, and come away with a couple of points, which absolutely incredible. And now he's going to a track in Suzuka, which he is comfortable with, having raced in Super Formula in Japan already this season. I'd anticipate, is going to be a really popular pick as well amongst many engaged managers, and I can see quite a few people going with a team like this. And I do think, for me personally, as much as I like Yuki Tsunoda across the season so far, he has just tailed off in recent races. So I think it is pretty close between Lawson and Guan Yu Zhou. I'm leaning just slightly towards Guan Yu Zhou at the moment though. Let's bring on the F1 Fancy Tools so you can see why. In terms of overtakes this season, if we bring it down here, you can see Guan Yu Zhou is completely on his own in terms, I've ranked this by average, in terms of overtakes compared to the other budget drivers. The next budget driver is Yuki Tsunoda down here, down in what's that, P8, P9 sort of region. And then when you also add in positions gained as well, swap it around so it's just positions gained. You see Guan Yu Zhou, again, budget drivers, top of the budget drivers. Tsunoda's dropped down a little bit. And look at recent races in terms of just positions gained. Tsunoda, 0, 0, 2, -1, 2, 0, -6. Tsunoda is not getting those positions gained, and that is a really important part of how budget guys score their points. We compare that to Guan Yu Zhou's 7, 2, 0, 8. The -11 came from that terrible start in Hungary, admittedly, so a bit of a scratch on his score there. But otherwise, like positive, pretty much across the season. And you can see he's ranked 5th out of all drivers in terms of positions gained this year. And again, in qualifying trim, the Alfa Romeo doesn't look super great. So I'm thinking it could be a good shout to get Guan Yu Zhou. And we combine the two, positions gained and overtakes. Guan Yu Zhou suddenly pops up into 2nd place on average across the season, only topped by Sergio Perez because he's notoriously bad in qualifying this year and then gaining those positions with relative ease in the rocket ship that is Red Bull. So Guan Yu Zhou right at the top of the leaderboard for where budget guys score their points, and in terms of actual DNFs as well, he's been pretty consistent. So I do think that in terms of the budget driver, like I say, let's cross that off. I'm kind of leaning towards Guan Yu Zhou, and this does actually maximise my budget as fully as I can stretch it, basically. But I am very tempted by Liam Lawson as well. So I'll be very curious to know what your decision making is between those three guys. Because I think if you've got the budget between Zhou, Lawson, Tsunoda, who would you pick? I'd be quite interested to know some other people's thoughts. Like I say, leaning towards Guan Yu Zhou, but I can fully expect to see some of you guys go for Liam Lawson and maybe Tsunoda. And in terms of price increase as well, I do think that Guan Yu Zhou and Liam Lawson are kind of on par. If they do well, they seem to go up $500,000. So if you're looking to build your budget, I don't think that's really a factor in decision making this week between the budget guys. So yeah, this is pretty much what I'm set on. Like I say, probably using the wildcard, as drastic as it sounds to save a -4. But I just don't see ever using, Qatar is up next after Japan. And I think it's another track that should suit the likes of Red Bull, McLaren. So I definitely won't be using more than 2 transfers next week, I would imagine. And therefore, I'll go up to my bank of three free transfers. Such a mouthful to say. 3 free transfers going into the next race after Qatar. In which case, if I need to make drastic changes with those 3 transfers available, I can just quite easily change almost half my team as it is. So I don't think I'm going to use the wild card down the line. Let's just save the -4, to be honest. So that's kind of where I'm at. This is pretty much not a lock at the moment, but it's very, very close to a lock, and I will be making my final decision probably before FP3, because FP3 is right in the middle of the night for me, and I don't want to randomly wake up and have missed the deadline, even though I am going to be setting my alarm. It's just I don't know, maybe I should wait for FP3 and just make the final decision in the morning right before the deadline. But I want to make sure when I wake up I'm not bleary-eyed and make some stupid decision. I want to be clear on my decision going into the night, see what happens in FP3, reevaluate here and there, and then lock it in. But yeah, I think I'm pretty much leaning towards this. The alternative, like I say, is probably going to be Liam Lawson and potentially Carlos Sainz, but we'll see. I think more Perez. I'm thinking the triple Red Bull is going to be strong this weekend. So that's it for me for now, and I'll be back again as always for more chit chat on the Qatar Grand Prix in a week or so. But that's it. I hope you enjoy the race wherever or whenever you're watching. If you're staying up in the middle of the night, then good luck with that. And like I say, I'll be up at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning to watch it. So yeah, hope everyone enjoys it. Hope everyone has a nice weekend. And yeah, let me know, like I say, your thoughts and feelings on your team selection this weekend. Thanks very much for listening to me blabber on about F1 Fantasy yet again. Thanks and goodbye.